Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today marks 80 years since the start of the D-Day Normandy landings, with the need to get everything in place for the invasion to take place at midnight on the 6th of June 1944. The build-up to this had been done in remarkable levels of secrecy, given how much was involved in the planning and implementation. Since my grandfather, Sir Harold Harding, wrote about his experiences running the construction of the caissons for the Mulberry Harbours, I thought I would share them today as a mark of respect for the inspired success and dedication of all involved, and as a homage to the bravery of the troops who carried out the invasion itself. What follows are my grandfather's words from his book It's Warmer Down Below, and these include extracts from a letter that he wrote to his civil engineer colleagues in the October that followed the landings. It may come as a surprise to learn that during the war, the institution of civil engineers became more vigorous than before in spite of paper rationing. Meetings were held at lunchtime. Papers on soil mechanics became numerous as the war brought new problems which were solved by the building research and roads research boffins. During this time, I was appointed to my first ICE committee to advise the War Damage Commission on war damage due to earth movement in order to distinguish false claims from true. I also sat on the Benevolent Fund Committee and the start of the Code of Practice Committee on Site Investigation. Another interlude was to thicken up the dam at the end of the Serpentine in Hyde Park by tipping London clay from the deep shelter tunnels into the water. It had been realised that the southeast corner and the south overflow were well above ground and, if breached, would flood St George's Hospital and other buildings, as well as the Piccadilly Tube. This involved a visit to the park authorities on Duck Island in St James's Park. There, we learned that in the 1880s, John Mowlem had driven a timber heading under the grass east of the Pelicans in the waterlogged gravel. There was a pumping station concealed on the island, as well as Princess Elizabeth's rabbits, and it collected water from this heading and pumped it up to the Serpentine when this needed topping up. At this time, a lot of tunnelling was going on, forming deep shelters with 16-foot diameter concrete segments. With unusual intelligence, these were driven in a line with transitional curves so that after the war they could be joined up to form express tube lines to relieve the existing ones and so have a second use. However, reverting to type, it was later decided not to use them, but have new lines in different areas. Mulberry Harbours. The work of building 47 concrete petrol barges for the coming invasion in case Pluto did not work was secret and unsuitable for description. After the war, several of these still floated for a few years outside County Hall at Lambeth as moorings for pleasure craft. They were built on the export quay of the West India Dock and each weighed 150 tons and were lifted into the water by the London Mammoth floating crane. During this, bombing started again and my office was blasted, but I was not there. I had just embarked upon making some of the concrete monoliths for the Mulberry code word for the invasion harbour at Ramanch. I was given the south dock of the Surrey docks to build in, one of the oldest in London, but with new warehouses along one side. It had an entrance into the Thames which had been bombed, so that only one gate survived, and naturally that was designed to keep the dock full of water while we were trying to empty it. The work of getting the dock into an empty and usable condition took longer than the making of the monoliths and included making a massive concrete block wall with the help of divers to seal the river entrance. The other one, into the Greenland dock, was simpler to deal with. This is the letter. 14th of October 1944. Today the beans have been spilled about the synthetic harbours and all that, about which we have had to keep so mum. The 21 Club, his network of former undergraduates at Imperial College, was well represented in building the caissons or phoenixes. Holbein and Mac Briggs deciding to do more construction and less demolition, having built several of the largest down on the mud flats, while I had the task of making 8 of them of the second size in the Surrey docks. This was a spectacular arrangement, but no photo could be taken. However, one of our leading consulting engineers, named Duvy, guided our erring footsteps and made a remarkable perspective or landscape drawing which would be worth reproducing if our secretary ran to illustrations. We had to dry out a wet dock with a ballast bottom, tip in 70,000 cubic yards of bombed brickwork from buildings and level them off to a benching. The sides of the entrance lock turned out to be curved below water level, and in the end it was found that there was not much more than 6 inches clearance in towing out these affairs. Although they are no longer secret, I am told that their dimensions are. The Daily Express says that they were secretly prefabricated by bewildered workers in Britain. So that explains their peculiar behaviour and habits. They were bewildered. Still, somebody must have worked between the tea intervals, or they would never have got built. Perhaps all the flap and stress of trying to get them done made one take a jaundiced view, but it was certainly an experience for all concerned. Glossop built 4 more, close to Duvy and me, in the Surrey docks, but in an excavated basin. The other basins were dug as deep as was safe in order to build a caisson 14 foot deep and then float it out and finish it afloat elsewhere. But in his case, we put in a very pretty system of shallow wells and lowered the water so successfully that he was able to build his completed in a much deeper basin. He has since reclaimed his wells and completed some more. These had to be towed out by a dock pilot, who is a civilian in a bowler hat, who seems to have a monopoly of handling ships in the dock. In this case, the pilot wasn't so hot and missed the opening by 6 feet. After much pulling and swearing, Glossop persuaded him to let 2 bulldozers pull it back for him from the bank, which was done very successfully. Dock pilots do not like advice. The pilot then blew his whistle and gesticulated. The tugs churned and puffed in the entrance, and nothing happened for a long time. It was then found that the pilot had forgotten to cast off the bulldozers. Duvy and I took a trip down to Gravesend on one of these units, which was very interesting. The remarkable thing is that one makes retaining walls in concrete with asphalt every convenience, and they leak like sieves. One then makes concrete boxes with 12 inches of concrete and float them, and they remain dry. Perhaps the secret is having them floating and not pushed around with earth movements. It would be a good idea if someone finished off this war as soon as possible. Things have certainly moved since June. During July and August, the sky was thick with planes doing things in a big way and all flying south to Normandy. They now fly off east, which shows how far we have gone. And then he returns to the book. Directly after D-Day, the flying bombs and V-2 rockets arrived. It is interesting to note that they did much superficial damage to houses and people, but failed to do the damage to below-ground services, so made work for builders and not civil engineers in repair work. By various means, I had kept my nucleus organisation going on my working site in Bow Goods Yard, Marshgate Lane, so was able to turn it into a depot for the new firm of Soil Mechanics Limited. In this way, we were able to keep it free and independent from the deplorable plan department. This new firm of ours was the first of its kind in this and many other countries, and led the field for decades, having developed beyond all expectation. This started almost a revolution in the profession and industry of civil engineering and was an example of free enterprise. Thank you for watching or listening to this insight from behind the scenes to the events of long ago. War is an unpleasant process, and it is the end of wars that is behind the marking of today. It is encouraging to know that even in difficult days, positive creations can hatch. The fledgling work of Soil Mechanics Limited is a case in point. Ultimately, when Harold Harding sat on the tribunal investigating the ghastly disaster in Aberfan in the 1960s, which has some parallels with the current Post Office inquiry of ignorance and bungling ineptitude, the recommendations that came out, prompted by the tribunal recommendations, has saved many, many lives. Thank you.